fatigue, muscle cramps, brain fog, mood changes, weaker bones. It's incredibly common for these symptoms to get labeled as just getting older and left at that. Sometimes that's accurate. But a meaningful portion of the time, these symptoms trace back to one of three specific, easily testable nutrients: vitamin D, vitamin B12, and magnesium. All three become more likely to run low as you age. All three are measurable with a standard blood draw, and all three are correctable once identified. Let's go through what each one actually does, how common deficiency really is, and what a blood test can tell you that guessing never will. Why guessing doesn't work here. Before getting into each nutrient specifically, it's worth explaining why testing matters more than assuming. The symptoms of low vitamin D, low B12, and low magnesium overlap significantly with each other, and they also overlap with ordinary aging, other medical conditions, and side effects of common medications. Fatigue can mean any of these three things, or none of them. Trying to guess which one applies to you based on symptoms alone is genuinely unreliable. A blood test replaces guesswork with an actual number, which is what allows you and your doctor to address the specific thing that's actually low, rather than taking a supplement for something that may not be the issue at all. Vitamin D. Vitamin D isn't really a typical vitamin. It functions more like a hormone, and it's essential for calcium absorption, bone health, immune function, and muscle function. Deficiency becomes considerably more likely with age for several overlapping reasons. Skin becomes less efficient at producing vitamin D from sun exposure, kidneys become less efficient at converting vitamin D into its active form, older adults often spend more time indoors, and sunscreen, while important for skin cancer prevention, further reduces vitamin D synthesis from sunlight. How common is this, really? Using U.S. National Health Survey data, researchers found that among adults 60 and older, vitamin D deficiency, defined as blood levels below 30 nanomol/L, affected about 4% of this population, while a broader measure of vitamin D inadequacy, defined as levels below 50 nanomol/L, affected about 17%, nearly 1 in 5 older adults. In institutional settings like nursing homes, the picture is considerably more concerning. Reported deficiency rates in that population have ranged anywhere from 8% to as high as 94%, depending on the specific cutoff and testing method used, reflecting both a higher risk population and variation in how studies define deficiency. What the blood test measures. A standard blood test for vitamin D checks a marker called 25-hydroxyvitamin D, often written as 25.OHD. This is considered the most accurate way to assess your actual vitamin D status, since it reflects both what you get from food and from sun exposure. What low levels are linked to? Research has connected inadequate vitamin D status to increased fall risk, reduced bone density, and worsening frailty in older adults, in addition to its well-established role in bone health generally. Vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is essential for nerve function, red blood cell production, and DNA synthesis. Unlike vitamin D, B12 deficiency in older adults is driven less by diet and more by an absorption problem specific to aging. Here's the mechanism. Absorbing B12 from food requires adequate stomach acid, along with a protein called intrinsic factor, produced in the stomach lining. Stomach acid production naturally declines with age, and this reduced acid environment makes it harder to release B12 from food proteins, even when someone is eating a diet that contains plenty of B12. This is why B12 deficiency in older adults is often described as an absorption issue rather than an intake issue. Someone can be eating adequate B12-containing foods and still become deficient because their body isn't extracting it properly anymore. Certain medications compound this further. Long-term use of proton pump inhibitors, which suppress stomach acid for conditions like acid reflux, is specifically linked to reduced B12 absorption. Metformin, one of the most commonly prescribed medications for type 2 diabetes, is also well documented to interfere with B12 absorption with long-term use. How common is this really? A study specifically looking at older adults with diabetes who were taking metformin long-term found a B12 deficiency rate of about 29%, with deficiency significantly more common as age increased within that group. A separate hospital-based study of adult outpatients found a B12 deficiency rate of about 13% using a stricter cutoff. Research specifically on frailty has also found that older women with lab evidence of B12 deficiency had a meaningfully higher risk of frailty compared to those with adequate levels. What the blood test measures. A standard test checks serum B12 levels directly. In some cases, if the result is borderline or symptoms strongly suggest deficiency despite a normal B12 reading, doctors may also check a related marker called methylmalonic acid, which can rise even when B12 levels look technically adequate, catching some cases that a basic B12 test alone would miss. What low levels are linked to? B12 deficiency has been connected to peripheral neuropathy, the tingling, numbness, or burning sensation in hands and feet, as well as cognitive symptoms that can be mistaken for normal age-related memory changes and increased frailty risk. This is part of why B12 deficiency deserves real attention rather than being dismissed as a minor lab abnormality. Magnesium. Magnesium is involved in several hundred biochemical processes in the body, including muscle function, nerve signaling, and blood pressure regulation. Like the other two nutrients, several age-related factors make deficiency more likely. Kidneys become less efficient at retaining magnesium. Digestive absorption becomes less efficient, and certain medications, including some diuretics and long-term proton pump inhibitor use, are linked to magnesium loss. How common is this really? A large cohort study measuring magnesium status directly through blood testing in a population with an average age in the early 60s found that about 10% had a magnesium deficiency, and an additional 40% were classified as potentially magnesium deficient, meaning roughly half the studied population had magnesium status somewhere below the fully adequate range. Broader research reviews on micronutrient status in older adults consistently list magnesium alongside vitamin D as one of the more frequently under-recognized deficiencies in this age group. What the blood test measures. A standard test checks serum magnesium levels. It's worth knowing that serum magnesium isn't a perfect measure, since your body stores most of its magnesium inside cells and bones rather than in the bloodstream, so blood levels don't always perfectly reflect total body magnesium status. Still, it remains the standard practical way to screen for deficiency in a normal clinical setting. What low levels are linked to? Magnesium deficiency has been associated with muscle cramps, sleep disturbances, and in more significant deficiency, effects on heart rhythm and nerve signaling. An important interaction worth knowing about. Vitamin D and magnesium don't function entirely independently. Magnesium is required as a cofactor for several of the enzymes involved in converting vitamin D into its active form in the body. That said, it's worth being precise about what the current research actually shows here. A large study specifically looking at the relationship between magnesium and vitamin D status found only a modest statistical association between the two, and the authors concluded that the overall effect of magnesium status on vitamin D status was small in the population they studied. This is a case where the biological mechanism is well understood, but the practical, population-level relationship between the two nutrients is more limited than sometimes suggested. It's a reasonable detail to be aware of, but not something that should be oversold as a major finding. Why testing all three together makes sense, given how commonly these three deficiencies overlap in the same population, driven by shared underlying factors like reduced stomach acid, reduced kidney efficiency, and common medications like proton pump inhibitors, metformin, and certain diuretics. Checking all three at once, rather than one at a time based on a guess, gives a more complete and efficient picture. This is a standard, inexpensive panel to request, and for most people it can be included in routine annual blood work, without requiring a separate appointment or specialized testing. What to actually do with this information? If you haven't had these three levels checked in the past year, particularly if you're over 60, take any of the medications mentioned above, or have noticed fatigue, muscle cramps, tingling in your hands or feet, or unexplained mood or memory changes. This is a reasonable and specific thing to bring up at your next doctor's visit. You can simply ask your doctor to check vitamin D, vitamin B12, and magnesium as part of your routine blood work. If a result comes back low, treatment approaches differ meaningfully between the three, which is exactly why testing matters more than assuming and self-treating. Vitamin D deficiency is often addressed with a specific supplemental dose, determined by how low your level is, sometimes requiring a higher initial dose before moving to a lower maintenance dose. B12 deficiency, particularly when caused by an absorption problem rather than low dietary intake, sometimes requires B12 injections rather than oral supplements, since the same absorption issue that caused the deficiency can also limit how well an oral supplement is absorbed. Magnesium deficiency is generally addressed through dietary changes or supplementation, though the right form and dose should be guided by your doctor, particularly if you have kidney disease, since your kidneys are responsible for regulating magnesium levels, and impaired kidney function changes how magnesium supplementation should be handled. A note on self-treating without testing. It might be tempting to simply start taking supplements for all three without testing first, reasoning that it can't hurt. This isn't quite accurate. Taking a supplement for a nutrient you're not actually deficient in provides no benefit and in some cases isn't harmless. Excess vitamin D over long periods can raise calcium levels to problematic levels, and magnesium supplementation in someone with impaired kidney function can build up to dangerous levels rather than simply being excreted. Testing first, rather than supplementing broadly and hoping for the best, is both more effective and safer. Vitamin D, B12, and magnesium deficiencies are all genuinely common in older adults, all driven by identifiable age-related changes in absorption and kidney function, and all frequently linked to symptoms, fatigue, muscle cramps, tingling, cognitive changes, that get written off as ordinary aging. A simple blood test can replace that guesswork with an actual answer, and if a deficiency is found, it's a treatable one, with an approach tailored to which specific nutrient and how significant the deficiency is. If it's been a while since you've had these three checked, it's a reasonable, low-effort thing to request at your next appointment.